Oliver Pritchard.
And there we go. Did I take a while logging in there?
I don't know. We're still getting used to the new little jingle, though. It's cool, though. It sounds good. How's your week been, by the way?
Great. We finally finished the renovation work, so getting a bit of echo there. Okay. Yeah, finally finished the renovation, so things are definitely looking positive here.
And now, Ollie, I don't want you to fall off your chair there, but would you believe I was actually in Crepes and Waffles today?
I read.
Yeah, interesting. They don't give you menus anymore. You have to have your smartphone. I think that's a bit elitist. But anyway, maybe we can discuss that in another episode. But what we've got coming up on Colombia, only live and interactive English language chat show, it's a case of back off, brother. Yes, we're going to talk about public space abuses in Colombia. It's a topic that tends to divide opinion more so than it unites. For what some people feel is a violation of public spaces, others will say it's fully within the rights of the individual or group in question. For example, rappers and such like on public transport. Are they guys just doing what they can to make a living, or a nuisance that should be banned? What about those folk who park their motorbikes on footpaths perpendicular to the street, obstructing other users? There's plenty of examples. As ever, we want to hear your thoughts on all this. Send us a message using the Facebook comment facility, or if you're watching this recorded, you can send a message via the medium on which you're viewing us, or simply send a tweet to @Bogotá_post. That's to come, but first it's our look at what we consider to be the week's news highlights. We'll chat about why many Colombians related strongly to the late, great Diego Armando Maradona shortly. Ollie's laughing. I wonder why. An Englishman laughing at Maradona. Anyway, Ollie, we'll start off in Bogotá, and a green corridor is being proposed for one of the city's main thoroughfares, Carrera Séptima. Now, I have visions when I hear this green corridor of palm trees and lovers walking arm in arm, listening to the sweet chirping of birds. But that's not exactly what it is it?
Well, it depends how charitable you want to be. By the way, that was a cough earlier, not a laugh. But you would, look, Claudia Lopez wants to do something with the Septima. That seems like a good idea to me. She's getting a bit of criticism at the moment because it's going to involve buses. People are saying it's a disguised Transmilenio. It's a way to sneak the Transmilenio in by backdoor methods, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a little unfair. Now, I've criticized Claudia in the past. I certainly don't think she's perfect. But this seems to me like it's got great potential to be a really fantastic plan. And actually, the cynicism of saying, is it going to be all palm trees and stuff? Parts of it might be pretty pretty.
Yeah. Have they shown any of those artist impressions of it in the proposals? Have you seen those? Because I have to admit, I haven't seen anything like that. I've just heard the story, and that it might involve as well cable buses, so kind of almost like trams or whatever.
Yeah, electric cables, yeah. And okay. I think that's really interesting because the reason we haven't got proper artist impression, I think, so far, and it is worth remembering that the big thing in this is that it's all citizen proposals. So what's quite interesting about this is they've spent a long time, now they claim they've got, I can't remember what it is, 50,000 or 80,000 citizen proposals. I can't believe that. But it does seem quite interesting, and it's worth remembering that these are things people have put forward. So any artist's impression don't necessarily match up with what the alcaldía will go with, just what somebody would like, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm. The thing about Septima, though, I mean, it's kind of always been the problem street in many ways and what to do with it. I mean, in lots of places, there wouldn't seem to be that much space. So I know your favorite method of transport is the private car or jeep. So where are they going to fit into this project, Ollie? Or should we just get rid of them?
Well, yeah, that's your answer. Yeah, I mean, look, cars are not naturally occurring phenomenon. We're not talking about something like a tree or a weed or a human being. We're talking about saying that people choose to, driving a car is a privilege. It's not a right. And, the idea of driving a car around in the middle of a city that has decent transport links, okay, everyone likes to criticize the transport here in Colombia, but transport exists. And especially if this corridor Verde is built, and we do have better transport links as part of it, well, yeah, absolutely, there should be a corresponding drop-off. Remember, Brendan, 80% of this city doesn't ponce around in a private car. When you design things for private car, you're designing those for 20% of the population of Bogota or less.
Yeah.
Now, why should we be giving them any priority? They should be glad they've got more than 20% of the streets that they can use.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record on this one, but I just know other people listening might say, but hey, these guys with their taxes on gas or petrol, whatever you want to call it, that they contribute more to the city. Might be one argument. I don't have the numbers, though, in front of me, but it could be an argument some people would say.
Well, I mean, yeah, people always like to do that, don't they? I mean, we get the same thing in England about, bankers and paying taxes, and we have to treat them nice, otherwise they'll just go away. No, screw it. You're making a lot of money out of Bogota. You should be taking some inconvenience, frankly.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But anyway.
Yeah, well, because I know that's kind of getting into something else that we might discuss in another episode, and we did in previous ones about broadening the tax base here and trying to get more taxes for the city well, not just for the city, but for the country, and that people feel that they're contributing to it. But outside of that, I just wanted to mention on this green corridor, because it is something that often infuriates me here. Like if you decide, because obviously there is a Transmilenio on the Septima already, but it competes with all those other private car owners. And even though they brought in a bus lane when I think it was Peñalosa, or it might have been even when Petro was mayor. I think it was actually when Petro was mayor. And initially it was policed and there were fines for private car owners who used the bus lane. But now it's a free-for-all. So you do your bit, you take public transport, but then you're competing with everybody else and there's no advantage to it. So I certainly agree with having dedicated bus lanes in the city.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, this is another example, isn't it? That when you treating private car users is incredibly difficult, because they just don't follow rules and they take a yard every time you give them an inch. And it's a nightmare. Yeah, as you say, they invade bicycle lanes, they invade bus lanes. And that's why we have to go to this ridiculous level of, literally hiving off the bus lanes, because private car drivers have proved again and again and again that they can't act like, reasonable human beings and adults. I'm sorry to bang this drum again, but there you go.
Yeah, I'm going to say private car owners that are listening in, what you make of that. Should you just ditch your car, leave it for holidays or whatever else, and use the public transport that is available? I know people are going to say, but the public transport doesn't work. It's a mess. But if more people,
of course not, because exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So people do let us know, and of course ties into the use of public spaces in the city as well, which we're going to be discussing in the second half hour of the show. Public space abuses really is what it is. So as you can see on the little ticker running down here along the bottom, gives you an idea of what we will be talking about. Are you infuriated by the way, and I might be generalizing here, Colombians seem to have, some anyway, a lack of spatial awareness when you're walking down the street. They just don't know you're trying to overtake them. We'll be talking about those kind of things in the second half of the show, but you can send us your thoughts on that or any other things right now. This time last week, Ollie, we were talking about a potential chaos on the 21st of November with the first anniversary of the big protests of 2019. In the end, it was a bit of a washout because, well, everything is these days, but nothing happened.
No. I mean, look, this was the big this was the day that we're going back onto. That's not working. This was the day that we're going back onto the streets, that people are going out, we're going to remember what happened last year. Lots of optimism before it from the organisers, but in the end, very much a damp squib.
Yeah, indeed. And as I said, it kind of, ties in with the weather these days anyway. But even though last year, you always get this weather in November, but there was people behind it. Do you think it's because a bit of pandemic fatigue and people are just, let's get through this moment. There's no desire to rock the system at the moment, and let's see where we are in 2021.
Well, it's worth remembering, Brendan, that the protests last year actually weren't that big a deal. Let's not forget, this wasn't ever a kind of Chile or, as we've seen recently in Peru or Bolivia moment. This wasn't millions of people out on the street. This wasn't hundreds of thousands, really. We're talking about a couple of 100,000 on the biggest day, and then that's around the country. So in that respect, I mean, it actually wasn't that big a deal when it started. I think it became a lot bigger because of that weird reaction. And then, of course, the tragic death of Dylan Cruz. But up until that point, up until the bizarre night that nights that we had when, we had all that nonsense with the conjuntos, until that moment, it was really quite restrained, I would have said. The actual 21st of November. And more of the same this time. The police don't seem to have jumped up to repress people so fast, and they've been rewarded for that by just apathy, really. But don't forget, I mean, these protests, even by February, were running low on steam.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And then along came COVID, which I guess is the line of the year for lots of things. But you'd almost forget, Oli, that last November we had the first toque de queda curfew in Bogotá, or Colombia in general, was it? Was it 40 years or something since the 70s?
Yeah, massive, yeah.
But of course, with this year, all our freedoms have been thrown, well, depending on your point of view, have been thrown in the rubbish bin, so we kind of don't care anymore about these things. Curfews are 10 a penny these days.
Maybe it was a test. Who knows?
Well, maybe they knew what was coming down the line. Underestimate Duque at your peril, indeed. Oli, speaking of travelers and visitors to this country, and of course today is Thanksgiving Day in the United States, but a lot of our friends from the north of the Americas have been visiting here. Not massive numbers. 40,000 is what ANATO, the tourism organization agency, in conjunction with Migración, have released these figures. So more than 40,000 visitors in September and October when they started reactivating international travel. The majority of those, almost half, from the United States. I guess no big surprise with that, because Europe's still in this very strange position, and there aren't many regular flights still.
Yeah, it's a bit harder, I think, to get between Europe and South America. Plus, of course, the United States seems to not care about COVID, so there's very few kind of issues between with traveling there. Yeah, I mean, listen, this is an interesting situation. It's something that I think Colombia's really not picked up on at all as a country, but this is potentially quite a dangerous situation. We've got people flooding in from the United States, and now that we've abandoned the PCR testing, which apparently looks like it's now going to be reinforced, which, I mean, to me, it's insane not to have that in place. Absolutely insane. If you're saying, oh yeah, let's bring people over from states like Miami, which very much, one of the hot spots, it just seems bizarre and kind of perverse in a way to not have the checking. I mean, I would have thought that's the one really logical thing that you can do to protect your borders. So you can say, look, we've contained this situation, within our own borders, but we've got a problem, of course, that other people might not be as responsible. That's fine. We'll just PCR test them. Yeah. no quarantine, no PCR testing. It's got to. I mean, listen. If a Colombian says to me, "I'm really not happy about this," foreigners are going to be bringing in the disease, I would say, actually, that's a fairly reasonable thing to say.
Yeah, do you think there was some sort of arrangement with the United States, considering, from what I believe, Colombians can fly there and don't have to show any test or anything? So a reciprocal arrangement or whatever, some pressure, and we do know that Colombia likes to kowtow to the United States from time to time.
Well, it seems. I mean, yes, you'd have to think it's something like that. But I mean, is the United States the model you want to be following on this?
Well, not with the current numbers for sure. Exactly. It's interesting, the breakdown of these visitors from overseas, though, as well. You could read maybe too much into them, but 67, almost 68% were men, and of that, 75% of those men were between 40 and 60 years of age, and this probably won't surprise you. In Antioquia, which of course Medellin is the capital, 75% were men going there. As I said, I'm not jumping to any conclusions, but there are the numbers. But on the flip side, in Valle de Cauca, where Cali, of course, is the department capital, the percent of women has increased on last year by over like 11 percentage points. Yeah, so. Yeah, kind of. Well, it's just interesting little breakdown. But yeah, about the PCR test, of course, that's kind of news that's just breaking apparently. So apparently, was it a high court judge or some judge anyway here has ordered that the government must now insist on that, but there might be an appeal. So it's a case.
It seems utterly bizarre to me that the government would appeal that. I mean, why? So this just seems to me like an absolute, it's an easy win situation that, frankly, the government is pissing up the wall.
Yeah, I certainly, like, you'd have to say, how much money are these tourists bringing in? I mean, is it that important that we need these overseas visitors?
Well, but also, is it going to stop a tourist? I mean, I don't think that anybody is going to be stopped from coming. It just, for the sake of getting a quick, inexpensive test. I mean, look, we're talking about people that are spending hundreds of dollars on a flight ticket. I just find it absolutely bizarre to not do this. It's a sort of disastrous policy I expect from the United Kingdom, not from Colombia.
Or Ireland, for that matter. Yeah, Ireland hasn't exactly covered itself in glory during this pandemic. But yeah, we'll leave that there. If anyone has any thoughts on that as well, of course, do let us know by using the live comment facility, or if you happen to be watching this pre-recorded. If you're watching.
Oh, and by the way, actually, I sorry, Brendan, I'm just going to chip in. Did you see the video today of a guy in Cartagena literally throwing money on the floor?
And he's throwing money on the floor for what?
Just walking around, throwing money into the air so that, local, relatively poor people scramble about to get it. Do we need that sort of tourism coming back? Do we need that sort of person in the country? I would say we don't.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't realize you were saying it was a tourist in Cartagena doing this.
Yeah,
okay,
sickening. Yeah. Scum.
Yeah, reminds me of a certain influencer who used to post videos doing the same thing. Great for one's PR, isn't it? Post a video of giving money to those who need it, of course, but what's giving them a few thousand pesos today, and then they have nothing a few weeks' time once the videos are gone. It's like when Ivan Duque last week was in San Andres or Providencia, wherever it was, and they're loading the cargo on. and so the photo is of him in the line of handing up the box, but then
so cynical.
Yeah, ridiculous. Anything for the right photo shoot. But a man who, well, depends on your point of view, did his bit for the poor, at least spoke out for them anyway, across Latin America, and for that, he was bigger than football in many ways. Diego Armando Maradona, to give him his full name, of course, passed away. And some people might go, why are you talking about an Argentinian footballer, a legend as it is, but it happened in, he's from Buenos Aires. But it's been obviously big news here as well, Oli. He was the working class hero across Latin America.
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting point, isn't it? That unlike many Argentinians have a bit of a reputation for being a little bit snobby, a little bit elitist. There's that perception that they don't think of themselves as being Latin America. They identify more with Europe, and they think that makes them better and blah, blah, blah. Diego Armando Maradona is definitely not like that. He was a man who really seemed to have complete solidarity with everybody in Latin America. Now, that leads to some problems. We've all seen the pictures of him cozying up to Chavez and Maduro. On the flip side of that, I think so many people across this continent look at him and see themselves reflected.
Yeah, it's this kind of idea of the troubled genius as well. So, number one, he came from obviously a poor barrio, a poor neighborhood of Buenos Aires, and rose up to be a world superstar. But then he had all the associated problems, the drug abuse, alcohol abuse, wasn't afraid to speak his mind as well. It was the whole package. And you can see the appeal and whisper it. You can kind of, I'm going to get myself into trouble for this, but like equate it to why people kind of still talk in kind of revered tones about Pablo Escobar in some quarters as well. That this kind of man who stood up for the people, despite all the flaws. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Maradona is not a man of violence. I'll make that clear, of course.
No, but somebody like Diomedes Diaz maybe would be a better example, who's still very much a legend in Colombia, despite, again, being a bit of a cokehead, let's say a fractured personal life, but a genius at what he does, who brings pleasure to millions, and of course really identifies with them. Let's not forget this. Diego Maradona really did things like say, when FIFA said, this is ridiculous allowing Bolivia to play at, 90,000 meters or whatever they play at in La Paz. And he said, it's comically high. I mean, you can't breathe up there. And Maradona said, look, no, it's their right in Latin America. People live high. It's their right to play where they want. I don't have a problem with this. And then consequently he had his team tanked 6-1. So, he put his money where his mouth was on those sorts of things.
Yeah, no, obviously a fascinating character. The greatest of all time, the GOAT, as they say. It's a big debate in tennis currently between Djokovic and Federer and the other guy, Nadal. But would you put Maradona up there? As an Englishman, of course, you have your own.
Well, it's interesting that you mention. It's interesting that you mentioned Nadal. Who again is almost certainly a drug cheat. And again, when we talk about Diego Maradona, I think it's impossible to overlook, his absolute lack of sportsmanship. It's one thing being a great, but if you cheat to be great, that's not ideal. And he's the player, frankly, that shouldn't have had to do that.
Well, Oli, interesting. I want to raise this point, though, because I was listening to the BBC, and not the World Service, so it was BBC Radio 2 this morning, and they were speaking to a few soccer correspondents from your own homeland in England. And one of them made the interesting point, saying that while people pointed to the cheating behaviour of Diego Maradona, and obviously England suffered greatly at the hand of God and all that kind of stuff, but this, and I can't remember the commentator's name or the soccer correspondent's name, football correspondent's name, but he said in the 1982 World Cup that you watch the videos back and the abuse that Maradona took, because obviously he was a small guy, small in stature and that, and that he had to stand up for himself, and that the fouls that were committed against him, the digs he was getting, like that the players weren't protected to the same extent that they are in football today. I thought it was an interesting point that he kind of had to grit his teeth and whatever about handballing a ball into the back of a net and that kind of stuff. But that he maybe had to get dirty to beat them, fight fire with fire.
But it's partly it's the lying about it, I think, is the thing that really sticks in the craw. I mean, how do you guys feel about Thierry Henry? I mean, there's look, cheating just isn't. There's no point playing any sport if you're going to cheat. What's the point? And yeah, I mean, I find it really bizarre how many people eulogize that moment. But you're right. He was battered from pillar to post compared to modern players.
Yeah, exactly. And the other side of it, like his skill level, and put the cheating to one side, because people again compare him to Messi and Ronaldo today, but they're playing on billiard table style football pitches, immaculately manicured. Whereas he was playing on these pitches in the 80s that had bumps and everything. It wasn't the same level. Not all the time, of course, but a lot of the time. So that's a problem when you compare past eras to current eras.
Well, yeah, I mean,
you have to factor those in.
And players like Andoni Goicoechea, who's equally reprehensible in, at the San Mames stadium in Bilbao, he donated the boots he was wearing when he almost ended Maradona's career with a savage tackle. Unnecessary late savage tackle. It's a real shocker. And to take such pleasure in that is just not on.
Well, of course, I know an Irish footballer who was captain at Manchester United as well, who seemed to take pleasure in injuring other fellow footballers.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I like Keane a little bit better because he likes dogs.
Okay, well there you go. Yeah, when he was sent home from the 2002 World Cup, his dog became almost an instant celebrity. Yeah. Triggs walking him around Manchester. Yeah. Angela's been in touch though, and nice to have you back with us, Angela. We missed you the last couple of weeks, I think. But she said it's a good example likening the way Maradona made people feel about him to Pablo Escobar. People either think he's a god or the opposite. Yeah, I don't think there are people who sit on the fence with Maradona, that's for sure. It's one or the other. And then, truth is, no soccer genius seems to have been seen in history. Myth? I don't know. Like, well,
no, I don't get that.
On your definition of what is a soccer genius. Okay. But thanks for that, Angela. And of course, if anyone else does want to get in touch, we're going to be talking about the public space abuses in a second. But will we leave Maradona there, or have you anything else to say on that, Ollie?
I don't think so.
Rest in peace, I guess. We'll say that much, wherever he is. One last thing. Last week, we were bidding adieu and saying adios to Carlos Queiroz. Officially, he is still the Colombian DT, as they say, the head coach. But it seems like they're taking a long time to settle this apparent golden handshake that he's going to get of up to $2 million. But as things stand, he's still coach. It
seems like it's going to be a bit of a process. Yeah, I mean, it's unusual to sack somebody so quickly into a contract. So I'd imagine there's probably quite a lot to be done.
And just to let everybody know that Bogotá Nights, we are on the money. We're on the button. We have people all over the city, indeed all over the country. But I have it on good authority that Carlos Queiroz and the Irishman involved in the Colombian setup were seen having their dinner this evening, just half an hour ago or so, an hour ago, in the well, I won't say the hotel because I might get myself into trouble, but in a well-known hotel in a posh area of Bogota. So they're still in the country anyway, I guess, negotiating the end of their contract. And one other thing I will say about football, because we haven't been mentioning the domestic league, of course, is continuing. It's down to the last 8. Unfortunately, no Millonarios in it, so that's why I haven't been too bothered about it. But this weekend they're playing the second legs of the quarterfinal, so we will have a Christmas time final to look forward to. But, Mr. Pritchard, we're going to talk about a topic that I know you're very animated about. and so am I on certain things. Public space and the use or, well, misuse and abuse of them here in this city and all over Colombia. And you're going to give us a couple of, well, not even hypothetical scenarios, but scenarios that do happen and do arise. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by the fact that I'm never quite sure. Like, I often see things and I think that's bang out of order, but then I think maybe I'm the one that's out of order. So I'd like to get a bit of groupthink. I'd like to know what's going on. So, okay, here's a hypothetical situation for you. You're on a Transmilenio. Let's say it's a Transmilenio, let's say 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. Okay, it's daytime, it's not rush hour, it's a relatively normal Transmilenio. A rapero climbs on. He starts making a hell of a lot of noise, because that's his job. Now, is that acceptable or is that not acceptable?
Well, I'll give my 2-second opinion on. Well, it won't be 2 second. My 10-second opinion on this. That it depends on the mood I'm in. If I'm there and I kind of have something to read or whatever, and because I'm basing this on previous experience when I was maybe going to a class and I had things to prepare. Of course, it was the most annoying thing in the world. But if I wasn't too bothered and I wasn't focusing on anything, I'd listen to them. It was okay. But should they be there? Should they be allowed on? Of course, officially speaking, they shouldn't be there by law, by the letter of the law. Isn't that true?
Yeah, by the letter of the law. Imagine.
Well, it does surprise me in this country, of course. Shocking.
It's so unusual to see a law being ignored. But yeah, I think it's quite interesting because I think some people genuinely do look at things like that and say, "Oh no, it's great. They're providing me entertainment and blah blah blah." To me, it just does my nuts. I'm just sitting there thinking, I've got something to listen to, as you said. I've got something to read, whatever. Or actually, I'd just like to look out of the window. Okay. But I'm really interested. I want to know what other people think. Is that an acceptable way to behave in public? To be kicking off all that music? And I don't mind them necessarily doing that. Right? If they were in the station doing that, it wouldn't bother me as much because it's a point that I'm moving past. It's the idea that I'm stuck in this little metal box with them that annoys me.
People would say, just get on your bike, Oli. Get off the
that is one of the reasons I do use my bike, actually, jokes aside.
Yeah, well, yeah, they'd be doing well to get on your bike and do it in front of you.
They really would.
Give us another scenario, and we'll come back to the music because there's so many other elements to it, and this pandemic has brought on even other issues.
I'll give you another one then. I'll give you another one. Okay, so we're in the Parque Nacional. Let's say it's a Saturday midday, let's say. Huge. I'm not talking about a little picnic with friends, 5 or 10 people. I'm talking about huge. They've got tents out. They've got big neon-colored tents. It's a massive child's birthday party. They've brought along a cake. Maybe they've even got something to actually cook on, like a little mini barbecue set and stuff like that. Now, and there's 20, 30, 40 people just basically colonizing an area of the Parque Nacional, creating an enormous amount of rubbish, making a lot of noise, and just basically getting in the way. Now, to me, again, that's not acceptable behavior. If you want to do that, that's fine, but hire a church hall or whatever. Colombia is absolutely full of those salones that are designed exactly for that, and there's a reason they're in business, and there's a reason you should be using them. I think it's absolutely unacceptable to use what is a shared space in that kind of way for a private celebration.
Well, if they gave me some free food and a can of beer or something, I'd probably say, go on, you're all right, lads. That's what they probably do to any police officers that might come around. Because, again, I'm guessing, well, in most other countries, you would need a license to do that. I'm pretty sure. In Ireland, I'd know, number one, first of all, insurance would be an issue if you're using a public space like that. It'd be, well, no matter what you're doing in any place, if you have a party and a gathering, you'd need insurance. Of course, that doesn't come into play here because it's every man, woman, and child and whatever else you're having for themselves. So, yeah, that's not an issue here.
Yeah, no, it's bizarre, isn't it? And the other thing that really annoys me is, private venues are set up for stuff like that. They've got things like toilets. They've got things like, cleaners to come and clean up all your rubbish. And actually, one of the things that also annoys me about this is those people are in business. They run those businesses for a reason, and they're probably quite good at what they do. It's not my cup of tea. I can't imagine why I'd ever go to one. But you should be going using or don't have a party. That's fine too. I don't really think we should be encouraging children to celebrate their birthdays, but maybe that's another thing.
Hold on. You can't just let that one go there. Why should children celebrate their birthdays?
I think that's probably the least controversial thing I've ever said in my life. Once you're past, under 5, you're not going to appreciate it. Over 5, grow up.
Okay, well, you want a 5-year-old kind of writing letters to the El Tiempo and giving out.
Yeah, no, I've always found birthday parties to be weird. It's this kind of I want to be the center of everything. Very greedy kind of attitude. No, I don't like it.
Okay, well, I'm going to kind of compare these two that we've mentioned, and there are many more that we're going to get into. But if you take the rappers or whatever, any kind of singers on the Transmillennial,
please take them.
Yeah, well, no, not tonight. I want to sleep. But if you take those, and then we look at the situation in a public park where you have a family and an extended family who've decided to take over a section of a public park for their own little party. I would put the rappers on a lesser scale of abuse because
interesting.
They're trying to make a living, at least. They're trying to make a few pesos to survive. Whereas, the family are just saving whatever money, and they could be a fairly well-to-do family. Who knows? So I would put it on a lesser scale in that sense. Neither of them I like, I have to say, but that would be my take on it.
That's an interesting one. I mean, I'd agree with that in some ways. I mean, I don't blame the raperos necessarily in of themselves. I just find what they do irritating.
Is it just because it's rappers? I mean, you're focusing on the rappers. I'm saying all types of.
Well, that's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because I know quite a lot of people that will complain vociferously about raperos, but then equally will go, "Oh, isn't it so great that there's a saxophonist on the train? Oh, yeah, so culto." And I go, get the fuck. I can't say there's nothing worse than a bad saxophone or a bad violinist. Oh, gosh, no. I don't. No, absolutely. All types of music are equal to me. In fact, if anything, I genuinely tend to prefer the raperos because at least it's something sort of honest and they're not just doing covers.
Well, Oli, are you auditioning here for Britain's Got Talent or whatever? You could take what's Simon Cowell's job or whatever. I like it. But in fairness, there is that, and it comes back to that earlier point. It was all about crepes and waffles and elitism, rappers and that kind of music. And I was on a Transmillennial when that's why I put it in the comment ticker tape thing below about a breakdance. I remember being on a Transmillennial when they were dancing on it in that tiny space. Like, fair play to them for doing it. But that's associated with ñeros here. And I always find it difficult to translate that word because I'd get into trouble by using one in Ireland that I'd use, so I'm not going to say it. But, that people who know what ñeros are.
That's interesting. I would strongly argue, because students ask me all the time, how do you say ñero in English? And I always say, look, number one, I don't think you should be using it overly in in Spanish anyway, because I don't think it's a particularly nice term. It's often bound up with "we hate working class people" in general. But anyway, but I think it's very important. I don't think a ñero is a chav or is an oca. I think very much those kind of subcultures are very heavily linked to the society they come from, and I don't think you can really say that a ñero in Colombia is equivalent to a chav in England or whatever the expression is in Ireland. I think those are different phenomenons. Linked, definitely, but yeah.
I agree to a certain extent. Of course, there's a ñero dress here and things like that's associated with it. But to be honest, I'm guessing people I drink with on a weekly basis, people will probably go, "Oh, Brendan, you're drinking with." They'd probably say that for some of them anyway. So I've absolutely no issue with them at all. By the way, Paula is in agreement with you, Oli, well, and I think
with
me
us
too on this. Yes, with us. That when people, of course, they don't pick up their... well, this happens with everything here. Who is responsible for their own rubbish? How many times they're drinking a disposable cup of coffee or whatever, bang, on the street. So you're just getting that multiplied by a factor of 20 or 30 when it's a big party in a park. People don't pick up their own rubbish. Mm-hmm.
Since I adopted dogs, I've realised I never had realised the sheer quantity of bones that there are in Bogotá. There are chicken bones, especially, just absolutely everywhere in the city. Disgusting, absolutely disgusting. There's no excuse for it.
Horrible. On the rubbish thing as well, I was actually in a taxi the other day with a Cuban guy, and he was drinking a disposable cup. And the taxi driver, who was from La Guajira, said, "Oh, just like throw it out the window." And he said, "Oh, no, God, no, I never do that." Now, I'm not saying that all Cubans are like that, but I was like, "Oh, I'm impressed with that," because in my experience here, a lot of people just open the window and out. Another reason to dislike car owners.
No, definitely. They're the worst for that, yeah, absolutely. Okay, do you want another situation, Brendan?
Go on, give me another one.
Okay, so here's another little thing. So this is where maybe it kind of, because it's interesting what you mentioned there about depending what type of music it was, because I think it is important to look at the things you approve of. So there's a scheme in my local park, which I'm a massive fan of. I think it's amazing, but I'm really not sure if it's ethical. So in the park, a bunch of concerned citizens, no help from the alcaldía, not linked in any way, they've started doing composting. And some people in the neighborhood, who I talk to when I'm taking my dogs out to the park for their toilets, people say, I don't like this. It's got lots of flies buzzing around it, it attracts vermin, blah, 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 and it takes up a lot of space. Those are reasonable complaints to make. And it's interesting here because I have to check myself and say, stop moaning. And then I think, whoa, but hang on. Maybe it is wrong. Just because I agree with it, it's the type of thing I like, composting. I now take my stuff there to compost. Just because I approve of it doesn't necessarily mean it's okay, if you see what I mean. Like, I approve of the scheme. I'm not sure if I approve of them just unilaterally deciding we're going to take over this space. And I mean, they've taken away, I'd say, a good 10 meters square. Well, 5 meters square.
And I guess factor in a city that doesn't have too many green spaces in it. For starters, they're precious for everybody to enjoy. And if you take away with 10 meters of one of them, especially depending on what area of the city you're in. So yeah, that's kind of tied, I guess, obviously to the green movement, and people would say, well, you're doing good for the planet. So I can, and it would rest well with me as well. So I kind of think, well, it's a good initiative. It's doing good for the community. It's kind of, if you're saying the greater good for the greater number in terms of a utilitarian approach, to me, it ticks that box going forward. Okay, there's a few flies and vermin, but then you can say, well, they're concentrated in that area. Well, but I do agree. I can see the other point.
Being middle-class Colombian liberals, of course, they've reacted to this by simply going, "No, it doesn't," rather than trying to address the concerns of residents. So yeah, we'll see where that goes in the end. But we've had the police called. I mean, this is quite a serious thing. As the collective have been there working, a couple of times a patrullero has been called in by concerned residents.
Okay, well, it's that scenario of NIMBY, not in my backyard. So what people might say, oh yeah, it's good, good to have these things, but we don't want them. We don't want to be looking at them. I mean, it's the other point is like drying your. Just come into my head now, but it's kind of related. Drying your clothes on a window on a window that the rest of the public can see. The last conjunto I was in, I can't really dry my clothes showing out to the rest of the public here, but I used to do that, hang my clothes. This is in a conjunto, so it was private property in a sense anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the other neighbors in their apartments obviously called the vigilantes, and the receptionist came up and said, "Oh, you got to take down your clothes." I was like, "I'm drying my clothes. What's wrong with that?"
No, and actually, I've discussed this many a time with foreigners, including a countryman of yours, and then he's been told things like, "Oh, in developed countries that wouldn't happen." And he's like, "What are you talking about? People do that in Ireland all the time. Every single person with with drying to do just hangs it up. Of course, where else are you going to put it?" And I've always found that absolutely bizarre, and I've known quite a few Colombians that will dry clothes in a tiny, airless, dark room just because they don't want the alleged shame of hanging it in the window where it will get some light and get some air. Bizarre.
Yeah. Well, Snyder's made the comment about it's to do with a person's upbringing. I guess this is to do maybe within parks and things like that. But again, on the flip side, if you're talking about somebody's upbringing, certain people of a certain upper class or a higher socioeconomic level here don't like things that we find, and we will be seen as richer because we're from the richer West here, that we find normal, as in drying your clothes, hanging them on a window or whatever, or putting them outside because they will dry quick. I just think it's efficiency. It's an odd one. It's a status symbol.
But it's common sense. You have to, you have to be insane. You can't. Clothes are not going to dry efficiently and quickly, and critically, they're not going to dry well if they're in an airless room, are they? You're just going to have a load of damp. Horrific.
Right, of course, as my father would say, it's a great day for drying. So put them out there. Of course, this weather, it's not great for drying, but you get maybe a couple of hours in the morning if you're lucky to get your clothes dry. I wanted to bring up something with the music and the pandemic, which has become an issue, or certainly because fewer people are using public transport and going out to offices. Well, if you're not going to go to them, it's a case of they'll come to you. And these singing people outside your window, you love it, Oli, don't you? When they come along singing Vallenato outside.
Look, again, this is where we're, much like the clothes and the window, this is really blurring the line between public and private, isn't it? Yes, they're in public, in the street, and they've got the right to do blah, 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 whatever they like, but it's affecting me in my private habitation. Now, I don't think it's unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say that when I'm in my house, I should expect a reasonable level of quiet. Now, I happen to live in the city centre, more or less, and as part of the trade-off of the location, I have to put up with traffic noises and stuff like that. That's reasonable. But come on, there's a limit. Like, when people turn up, no, I'm often working, Brendan, when they come round. I'll often be in the middle of a class, and suddenly I can't hear my students because I've got this racket going in, so I have to put in my headphones, which I don't like using when I'm in class. Now, I don't think any of this justifies the people, we've seen some horrific videos out there of people throwing bleach, boiling water, stuff like that. Disgusting, absolutely. You've really got to look at yourself if you're doing that. But equally, I don't think what the people are doing is right.
Yeah, well, the most common one around my neighborhood at the minute here in El Redil, up in 174, is it's not music these days anymore. I haven't heard the guys coming around singing for a few weeks. It's the arepas boyacenses calienticas. It's just on repeat for about like half an hour every day. Just
Here's a mystery. And by the way, if anybody knows much about dog behavior, now I've got a friend who has a that it's to do with the frequency of the announcement, but whenever the Masamora Paisa guy comes past, you know, Masamora Paisa, Calendido la leche. Yeah. So he comes past, and every single time he comes past on his motorbike, if we are in the house, one of my dogs just starts howling, puts her head back and just goes, woo! Like that. But if we're outside and he passes, yeah, look, she's never had Masamora as far as I'm aware in her life. But if we go out to the park, and we're in the park and he comes past on his motorbike, she doesn't make any noise. What's that about?
Okay. It must be something with the sound inside. I can imagine, again, the counter arguments to all of this would be, well, in your house, why don't you get double glazed windows and have proper insulation? Of course, insulation doesn't exist really here in this country. Like, the walls are so thin.
But hang on, but also, why should I take precautions for somebody else's behaviour?
Because they'll say, well, I'm out in the public on the street. I can shout and jump and whatever I want.
Well, but that's the thing. That's the thing, isn't it? That's why we bring it. Are you allowed to do exactly whatever you want? And I suspect. I mean, this is where it would be really interesting. We do usually have a few female commentators. I'd be really interested to know where people stand on things like talking to strangers. Now, you see, sometimes I'm in public spaces, you know, walking down the street, sitting in a park, whatever. Sometimes I'm fairly open, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'll be buried in my phone, or I'll be focusing on my dogs or doing something else. And people still just come up and talk to me all the time, and I think there's often a bit to it where I think, look, what am I giving? There's no body language that I'm giving off that says, please approach me and talk to me. Why are you doing it? I find that really out of order. And I suspect that a lot of women will say the same thing, that they'll say, look, just because I'm being female in a public place doesn't mean you have the right to just come up and bother me. I'd be really interested if somebody can comment on that.
I'd also be interested in that too, because is this a foreign local issue? Because is it the case that a local guy sees you, Oli, and obviously you don't look too Colombian, if you don't mind me saying, and kind of go, oh, look at this gringo here. I'm going to have a chat to this guy. I wonder what he's doing in Bogota, in a kind of friendly way. And obviously you're not in the mood to talk. You don't want. I've had this as well. You're kind of going, oh God, I don't want to have this conversation. And especially then if it's on a bus, because then other people are hearing it, and I kind of feel like, oh, everyone's like kind of in on the act now at this stage. And then on the flip side for the women, well, I was just going to say on the flip side for the women, it might be that, would a Colombian guy go up to an attractive-looking woman and kind of go, hey, here's my number? Or do foreigners kind of go, oh, here's a chance. I don't want to lose my opportunity to potentially be with this pretty girl. So maybe, because I know a couple of lads, foreign lads here, who have that mentality. They're kind of going, well, look, I've got to put myself in the game on this one.
Yeah, look, I mean, are other people opportunities? I think that would be my question to you. That's a strange, in my head, that's a strange word to use. And again, like I say, it really depends on what I'm doing. I don't always have the same reaction to this thing. I mean, part of being in public space is the fact that people do have the right to come up and talk to you. But there's a kind of balance there. There's a really big difference between me obviously being in a situation where I'm not entertaining somebody coming up and talking to me, and there's a situation where maybe I am. And those are, I think those are fairly easy situations to read. and if not sure, then err on the side of not bothering somebody.
But
But
there's
I find
another.
it bizarre.
Yeah, and
You know,
there's a couple of comments.
somebody will say, for example, you know, in a supermarket, they'll say, "Oh, are you buying that?" You know, like, yes. Sorry, what I'm buying. Well, why is this? What does this have to do with you? That's odd.
No, you shouldn't be buying that, Ollie. Look at the percentage of fat in the ingredients. What are you doing? Think about your health. Maybe that's what they're thinking. But I was going to say also, and again, I'm going to be guilty of generalizing here, but I've heard it said too, and I've experienced it sometimes that okay, I'll allow that they'll come up and talk to me when I'm not putting out any signals that I'm allowing it, but then they don't pick up the social cues whatsoever. That it's like, please, we've said our hellos.
Yeah.
Yeah, get about your business. So yeah, that can be a little bit infuriating. Like I've had it in. I spend a lot of time in panaderias, as people know, and I go there to work at times, and people come in and just like clear. I'll be there with my laptop working away, and I go, "Oh, well, okay, hello, whatever." But then they just continue to. It's like, can you not see? I'm trying to concentrate on something here, but just did not pick up the social cues whatsoever. Ollie, we have a couple of comments there. Do you want to give them a shout out?
Yeah, but it looks. I mean, Angela seems to confirm what I thought, that she says it's an imposition. You know, when men just felt like just approaching. And that doesn't surprise me. I do suspect. And there's quite a few people here saying various, you know, versions along lines of they don't want to miss the chance to talk to foreigners. That's Snyder. Angela again saying you're a foreigner, people are curious. Look, okay, that's fine. I don't mind people being curious, but I don't think you necessarily have the right to act on that. Again, going back to our analogy earlier, you might see somebody and think, oh, that looks like an attractive person. That doesn't necessarily give you the right to go and bother them.
Yeah.
And Paola Andrea as well here is pointing out that she would feel that there's a chance to get robbed would be higher. And that's reasonable as well. I mean, I would agree with that as well.
Yeah, certainly. And indeed, just the other day, I was walking down the street, and this guy, started, and I walk quite fast, and this guy started walking alongside me too, like, hey, what are you doing? Like, it made me feel very uncomfortable, I have to say. It's like, what are you doing? Like, what? And there was no point to his conversation. So I did, like, I kind of put my hands in my pocket, kind of going, is this guy going to try something in a second? But it passed off, thankfully, without incident in the end. Is there kind of a few ones that we're talking about in terms of, the spatial awareness thing does bug me when you're walking on the street. And again, as I said, I do walk at a pace when I'm going somewhere, and people just don't. They could be four abreast, and you're like, kind of, hey, I need to pass here, and there's just no awareness whatsoever, or maybe they don't care. I don't know, but it's like I'm trying to, and I usually do it, especially if you're like on a Transmillennial bridge, and I eventually get over, like, and I will make some sort of a hand signal to go, like, think about other people, please. But they never do.
That's what it fundamentally comes down to, isn't it? Think about other people. Not that hard.
Yeah. And the other one on that as well, motorbike owners. Two things on this. There's motorbikes that have the exhausts, and there's one on cue there that seemed to pass your window. But that one was relatively low key. But the really loud exhausts. Like, what is that about? They should be banned. I mean, they pierce your ears. And then the motorbike people who park their motorbikes on the footpath perpendicular to the direction of flow. It's just so inconvenient.
Yeah.
It's madness.
Madness. So next week we're going to talk about Christmas, right?
Yes, of course, because we're going to be in December.
Your favourite time of year, isn't it?
Of course, yeah. I love Christmas. I'm trying to be Santa Claus this year, I'll give it another few weeks.
Oh, you need to put on a few more pounds, I'd have said.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that's why I was in Crepes and Waffles today. And that's a nice point to leave it. We've come full circle. Until
Okay.
next week, guys. Bye-bye. Ciao,
Ciao.
ciao.
Ciao, ciao. Have we been cut? I believe that we've been cut.